Hey there, it's Tom Ryan, founder and CEO of ICR. Before we get into the next episode, I wanted to ask that you subscribe to the show. It'll help us get even more unique and interesting guests on the podcast and in turn continue to educate management teams and the growing ecosystem that creates value for fast-growing private and public companies. And while you're at it, head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star rating. Very much appreciated. This episode is brought to you by In-Q-Tel, an investment advisory firm that provides a premier endowment-style investment approach and family office services to eligible clients tailored to the unique needs of your family. The founding team behind In-Q-Tel are entrepreneurs at heart with an uncompromising focus on clients and investment excellence. With over 30 years' experience as investors, they have a broad understanding of each asset class, deep institutional relationships, and a network that provides assets to exclusive private investment opportunities. Visit www.ieqcapital.com to learn more.
While neither Tom Ryan nor the show receives fees from IEQ-Tel in connection with the sponsorship, nor is Tom a client of IEQ-Tel, ICR must note the potential conflict of interest in recommending IEQ-Tel in light of our potential for a future business relationship. All statements in this episode express the speaker's respected personal views and do not reflect the opinions or review of IEQ-Tel.
Where we've really tried to distinguish ourselves is by bringing more value than any other VC relative to the amount we invest.
Capital is king, but for sustainable growth and market longevity, it's essential to offer more than just financial backing.
A lot of that hinges on the network we've built. It is our own team's expertise in the space and willingness to work closely with these companies. And it is other VCs that we can bring to the table with us so that it's not just our resources, but much broader for these companies.
Being a public company can be hard. Small missteps can have outsized consequences. I'm Tom Ryan, founder and CEO of ICR, and over the last 25 years, we've helped thousands of companies understand and navigate the stock market and the media. We'll demystify these and other increasingly complex stakeholder groups so you can focus on what you do best, building your company and unlocking your true potential. This is Welcome to the Arena from ICR. Venture capital is all about cash, but in a crowded field, money is a commodity. To truly stand out, you have to go above and beyond for your portfolio companies. Today's guest has set themselves apart by providing exceptional support. We're sitting down with Seth Spergel, who is a managing partner of Merlin Ventures, where he's responsible for identifying cutting-edge companies for Merlin to partner with and invest in. Seth has more than 20 years of experience building, selling, and investing in software and startups. Prior to Merlin, he was VP for Infrastructure Technologies at In-Q-Tel, a strategic investment firm that invests in startups that meet the mission needs of government customers. There, he led a team of technology experts to evaluate companies and identify novel uses for their technology within the In-Q-Tel customer set. Before In-Q-Tel, Seth was VP of Engineering for ThinkGeek, an online seller and manufacturer of geeky toys and clothing. He also spent 12 years at IBM in roles ranging from software developer to sales manager. Let's enter the arena with Seth Spergel.
My focus is on the venture side, but that was not where Merlin started out. So if we go back, I think 27 or so years ago, David Phelps, our founder, started Merlin Cyber, which is our sister company that really focuses today on bringing companies into the US federal market. So their primary line of business is working with later stage cybersecurity companies, helping them do multi-agency enterprise agreements, really, focusing on those very mature companies that typically already have some footprint in the federal market. In 2018 or so, I joined, and the idea at the time was, could we stand up a venture arm to find early stage companies that also had relevance to the government market that we could invest in and bring into that pipeline of Merlin Cyber? And so that was really what we started doing, investing in Series B or so companies and trying to bring them into that same pipeline we had our sales reps focused on for these larger companies as well. And what we found was there was a bit of a mismatch there. Companies obviously needed to do some work to get ready for federal. But the other challenge we had was when we had reps focused on $10 million, $20 million enterprise agreements, and we were saying, hey, here's a startup, it's probably going to take twice as much work to do a 100K sale. what do you think of spending some time on this? We were not getting a great response.
Yeah.
And so we looked at how did we kind of grow that model and change it in a way that was going to make a lot more sense for everyone. The other challenge we had when we first started out was, I'm based in the Washington, D.C. area where Merlin Cyber is based. And there's not a ton of startups in the D.C. area. So it's really hard to find the right startups at the right stage to do the best investments. And so we were looking for, how do we pivot the model? How do we get access to the right companies? And what we saw actually was an opportunity in Tel Aviv where our messaging around this access to the government market was really resonating very well. In the US, you have a number of VCs that talk about access to government, including where I used to work, In-Q-Tel, which was actually created by the CIA, right? And a number of other funds that focus on defense or intelligence. Because of that focus on defense and intelligence, most of those funds are not really able to look outside the US very easily. Merlin Cyber's primary business is on the civilian market. And so there's a lot less restrictions there on foreign technology. They really just want the best technology. So we could go have those conversations in Israel and talk about the government access. It was really resonating, but it was a hard market to navigate for us because, again, being based in DC, you just don't have the reach. We got connected with a fund over there called Merlin Ventures, so had this great network in Israel. But he had a very small fund without a lot of resourcing behind it. We had a good platform and more resourcing to bring in this US footprint. And so as we started talking, we saw an opportunity to partner together. And so in 2021, we decided to partner and open up an office in Tel Aviv for Merlin Ventures. And just the growth we've seen since then has been tremendous. When we started investing over there, we saw that companies were interested in the government story, but they really needed help navigating the US market in general. And so we started working on building out a network of what's now over 300 US security executives that have an interest in working with these early stage companies and helping us figure out which ones to invest in for that matter. And we really use that to get these companies going in this market.
I mean, I was going to ask you, Seth, what really differentiates Merlin Ventures, but it's so obvious. Why wouldn't somebody want you in their cap table?
So it's actually not as obvious as you'd think, right? Because there are a bunch of early stage cyber funds over there. I think what's been different is, so if you look in Israel, other than us, there are 4 seed stage cyber focused VCs that are pretty well known over there. Where we have differentiated, one is we're the only one that's really a US fund. So we have this deep reach into the US market.
Yep.
But unlike most VCs, it's not a paid relationship. We're not paying these people to be our advisors, to work with these startups, right? And so we avoid a lot of the conflict of interest that other funds have run into.
Yep.
For us, it's very much a give and take, right? We are helping these US security execs understand the market. And in exchange, they are talking to companies that they have a genuine need for and helping those companies understand those needs. The other place we really differ, though, is our collaboration with other VCs, right? The other VCs in Israel tend to do seed stage deals on their own and not really bring in any other VCs until the next round. And what we've seen is a lot of the US funds are not loving that model, right? They want to get in on the seed deals, but unless you have that presence in Israel, it's really hard to do so. And so for us, we've taken the approach of we would rather bring in really strong partners with us on deals and together help accelerate these companies rather than just take the whole deal for ourselves. We're uncomfortable doing it on our own without somebody that really understands that Israeli cyber market. Let's do this deal together.
Yeah. And look, you're doing the right thing by the company, which over time is going to make you even more successful than you already are. What's your ideal portfolio company look like? What are the characteristics like? What pops off the page to you or what resonates with you in a meeting?
Yeah. This has been something that's been an adjustment for me coming from In-Q-Tel, where we're investing in companies that were typically ready for government shortly after our investment, to where we are today at Merlin, which is really seed stage investing, first money into a lot of these companies. And so we're investing in entrepreneurs that don't have any technology for us to really test. So it really is investing based on the strength of the founders and their vision. And this is where having a team over there that can really vet those founders and understand what did they do in the military? Where did they work before this? What is the reputation in the market?
Yeah. So, you make an investment in someone like you just described. What role are you playing in supporting and guiding that company on a day-to-day, week-to-week, quarter-to-quarter basis?
So I mentioned we started talking about our sister company, Merlin Cyber, and every year I give at their sales kickoff, I give an overview of Merlin Ventures. And I always have a slide up there saying that, they all think that venture capital is me handing out money to everybody that I like.
Yeah.
And it's not me picking the winners or our team picking the winners, right? It's having the winners pick you, right? The actual investment in the top companies, the top entrepreneurs, is very competitive. And so you do need to have a lot more than just money that you're offering them because, frankly, money is cheap. They can get money from a lot of different funds.
Yep.
Where we've really tried to distinguish ourselves is by bringing more value than any other VC relative to the amount we invest. And so a lot of that hinges on the network we've built in the US of security executives. It is our own team's expertise in the space and willingness to work closely with these companies. And it is, again, like other VCs that we can bring to the table with us so that it's not just our resources, but much broader for these companies. So, our process, the way we even start out before we invest in these companies is we'll do a monthly call with our advisors where we'll share the companies we're looking at to get feedback. And from those calls, we get, a lot of great information on, is this a space we should even be investing in? Is this the right company to bet on?
Yep.
But we'll also ask our advisors, does anybody have a need or an interest in meeting with this company? And from that, we'll get a group of sometimes over a dozen people that want to go talk to a company we're thinking of investing in. And so now we can go to that company and say, here's a dozen people that want to talk to you. They're potential customers for you, whether we invest or not, but they're also going to help us do diligence on you. So from that, we get great feedback on how did the pitch go? What did these people actually think of the deal when they heard it? But the startup itself is also already looking at us saying, these guys brought us a dozen customers before they even invested.
Yeah.
Just to look at us.
Without wanting anything in return.
Right. And so post-investment, we keep doing that, right? Like we have very close engagement with that network. We're constantly, talking to them to understand what their needs are. And that lets us not have to do any arm twisting to say, hey, I need you to take a meeting with this company, but instead let them come to us and say, hey, I have a need for machine identity security, right? Have you seen anything that's helpful? And we can say, actually, we have something in our portfolio that does that. Can we set you up for a conversation, right? And so really we're bringing a lot of these people that have an actual need over to our companies, which helps them with early design partnerships, early sales, just getting product market feedback, right? One of the biggest challenges we see with Israeli companies is really strong technology, but the US market and the Israeli market are very different from a sales perspective. And you'll see some of these companies come to you and say, hey, we've got it all figured out, right? We've deployed in 5 companies in Israel, right? A bank, an insurance company, this big conglomerate. It's great. We know everything we need to know. The difference is in the Israeli market, it's so small that the bank is probably your next door neighbor, right? The insurance company is your brother-in-law, right? You have a much easier path in. Trying to get through the filters of a US security buyer where they have not just the Israeli ecosystem calling on them, the American ecosystem calling on them, the European, the Asian, right? The whole world is trying to sell into this ecosystem, and you don't have any personal relationship with these guys. So that's where having this network of people who are friendly and asking to work with these companies really helps us help these companies kind of navigate that market.
Yeah. No, and I think another issue is as these companies scale, particularly in the industry that you're focused on, they're facing challenges around compliance and regulatory issues. Is that something that your network also kind of helps these companies get through? Because that has to be something they've never seen before, very complex, depending on where they operate around the world, right?
Yeah, and then the government side of things, right? That's another big value add we can bring. Our challenge is the Israeli cybersecurity market is such that a lot of these companies get acquired relatively early. So they don't necessarily get to a stage where they're ready to enter the federal market.
Yep.
But the ones that do, right, we have some capabilities on the sister company side around really helping them understand compliance. Those compliance requirements can carry over beyond just the government market. So one of the things that we've invested in on the other side of the company is a program called Constellation, which is a managed service for something called FedRAMP, which is a pretty heavy government regulation for SaaS products. It's not unusual for companies to spend $2 million in a couple of years trying to get through the program.
Yeah.
And so with Constellation, we've built a managed service where all the infrastructure is pre-built. And it's not just the infrastructure, but it's also the knowledge, right? We've got people over there that really understand government compliance, understand what you need to do to sell into these markets. And we can work with those startups when they're ready to start thinking about this. And ideally, even before they're ready to start thinking about this, just to sort of put the thought into their mind of planning for the future and building a product that's going to be more easily compliant in the future. But we can work with those companies to understand how to build to a place where when they're ready to sell to government markets, to state and local markets, even to regulated industries like energy or finance, they're much better positioned to do so. And they don't have to go waste cycles rebuilding things that they could have done right the first time.
Listening to Seth, it's clear that Merlin has developed a strong, personalized model and a deep understanding of the gap that they're filling in the marketplace. To really paint the picture, I asked Seth if he could share some specific case studies that show how their value led to a successful exit.
So I'll go back to that company I mentioned earlier, Dig Security. So when we met with Dig, there was something about the founder, right? His name is Dan. And Dan told the story not just about like, hey, here's the problem we're solving, but much more specifically about why that problem mattered, why existing solutions weren't good enough to solve it, and why he and his team were the right people to solve it. They had the right experience and they understood the problem. And so he was very compelling. That also meant that it was a competitive deal to get into. We took it to our network and presented it on a monthly call. And this was a couple of years ago, so smaller than those calls are today, but we had about 40 people on the call. And as we started talking about this company, a lot of them were coming back and saying, hey, we have this problem too. We would like to talk to this company and understand. And they were in the data security space. And so out of the 40 people on the call, over a quarter of them said, I want to talk to this company. We were able to go to Dig and say, hey, look, I've got 14 customers here that want to talk to you. They're going to help us vet and decide whether to invest in something that later on we realized was very unusual for Dan. He actually said, hold up, I'm not ready to talk to 14 customers right now, but I'll talk to a couple to sort of, get the conversations going. But based on those conversations, we saw that this was a company that made sense to invest in. And Dan saw that we were a VC that could bring some value here. So we invested in the company. We continued working with him, introducing him to more people, and also just working with him in terms of strategy. And so while we certainly drove some sales for him and helped him get to the revenue targets he had, I thought one of the more interesting things was about 19 months after we invested, Palo Alto actually acquired Dig. They actually acquired two of our companies in 1 week for about $1 billion total. And so a few months later, we sat down with Dan and just talked about kind of the acquisition experience. And he told us that one of the things we did for him that was most valuable that we didn't even realize was a conversation just on sort of market dynamics. When we started talking to him about kind of where the market was going around AI security and the fact that at the end of the day, a lot of the AI security companies we were talking to were essentially just pitching data security that was not so different from what they were doing. That conversation helped them realize that they could market themselves without making any product changes in a way that really positioned themselves in that AI security space.
Yeah.
And so the fact that we're spending this much time looking at the market, talking to different companies, understanding what our company's capabilities are, understanding what other companies' capabilities are, and just thinking through what does it actually mean for those companies in the market means we're able to have these conversations with our startups about not just how do we take what they already have and sell it, but how do we actually make it fit better into the market and the needs of the market.
People who can create these amazing solutions, but from what I'm hearing, being able to articulate that into a market positioning statement is hugely important. If you had to give a piece of advice to founders seeking funding, would that be the main piece of advice, or do you have 2 or 3 little tidbits?
That does touch on one of the key ones, which is explain to me why you are the team to solve this problem, right? Like there's a lot of startups that you can see it's the founders want to have a startup, right? And they're not concerned about solving a particular problem.
Yeah.
They just want to have a startup. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you need to show me that there's some passion about the problem you're trying to solve. And you need to show me that there's a leg up that you're going to have versus your competitors who are going to enter this market as well.
Yeah. What areas of cyber are you kind of focused on right now? What do you see as some of the biggest market opportunities right now?
Yeah. So, I think the whole market has obviously focused very heavily on AI and what comes out of that. And I think we are less focused on the pure AI security solutions because we've seen a ton of those, but more focused on where does AI kind of take the broader category of security solutions and what is the right way to approach it. And what we've seen so far is really not just let's throw AI into a vacuum and let it solve all of our problems, but where can we use AI to make our limited number of people much more effective, right? And reduce the amount of time they're spending on trivial tasks, on tasks that an unskilled worker could do, and let them focus on the stuff that really makes the most sense. And so this idea of AI augmenting humans to be a lot more effective at responding is a key piece of what we're looking for. And so, we have one investment in a company called Tamnoon. which, I guess fun fact is Hebrew for octopus. And it's actually a US company. The founders are Israeli, but they're both based in the US. They have built a platform for managed cloud remediation that the core of it is an AI-enabled platform for triaging and prioritizing cloud security threats. But what makes it so special is that they have a team of trained people that are able to leverage that AI and use it to respond much more effectively and efficiently to their customers' cloud environments. And so not only are they more cost-effective because of that technology platform and what the AI brings, but they're also just much faster at responding to things and much more accurate than a person would be on his or her own or a system would be on its own.
How about, look, the rise of cloud computing and migration to the cloud has to be impacting cybersecurity needs and investments. What opportunities are you seeing in that space given that migration and trend?
Yeah, cloud security, it obviously poses a lot of new risks. And I don't know how to say new risks, but poses a lot of risks.
Yep.
Right? We've certainly seen a lot of those risks emerge over the last few years. They're no longer new. But it also really makes some interesting opportunities, right? When everything in your environment is API accessible and you can start to do things much more quickly in a much more automated way, it opens up a lot of opportunities for new ways of doing security. In fact, going back to Dig, that was a key part of their pitch, was that we've been building data security tools for years, but they are built for different kinds of environments. And cloud opens up new attack vectors, but also opens up new opportunities for how you can detect and respond to them, right? Because you essentially have complete visibility into what's happening on all of your systems through a single interface point of your cloud provider. So cloud opens up a lot of opportunities for new types of technologies, new startups. And yes, we've been doing cloud now for well over 10 years, but we're constantly seeing new capabilities emerge. So, there's a lot of untapped opportunities still out there in cloud security.
Yeah, change creates opportunity for everybody. Seth, what's your take on the funding environment generally and the funding environment, particularly for Israeli startups? How are they managing through that? What's kind of happening on the ground?
So I think obviously October 7th has impacted the whole, the market over there significantly, right? And certainly we all kind of questioned what was it going to mean for the startup environment. What we have seen, at least on the cybersecurity side of that market, is it is so strong and such a powerhouse in the world that I don't want to say it hasn't been impacted, but we have not seen any sort of slowdown in it.
Yeah.
Right. And when you look at that market, you still see funding levels going up for cybersecurity startups. You still see the acquisition market extremely hot for those startups. I was over in Israel actually in April, and I had to give a talk on the state of the cybersecurity venture ecosystem. And when I started looking at the numbers, when you look at past times of conflict, whether that's war, whether it's COVID, whether it's financial crisis, the startups that are founded or funded during those periods actually significantly outperform the startups that are founded when it's easy.
Interesting.
Right. And it's sort of a filtering function, right? Like if you can make it through this, you're probably a pretty strong startup. And the other interesting piece of it is when I look at the acquisitions worldwide for cybersecurity, right? It's tapering off, right? We're not seeing as much activity. And when we do, it tends to be smaller acquisitions. When I look in the Israeli market, it's actually the opposite of that. In Q1 of this year, there were 8 acquisitions in the Israeli cyber market. If I look at all of last year, across all the cyber acquisitions, the 10 biggest ones, 8 of them were Israeli, right? So it's just a very strong market, and it continues to perform even with everything going on in the world.
Yeah, and it almost create just like a massive spotlight on the region, obviously, and what the work that those entrepreneurs are doing is even more important in the environment that they're in. And you hate to make it about dollars and cents and business and stuff, but the reality is it's a vibrant market and keeps attracting capital from all over the planet.
Yeah, and I think there's some really good reasons for why that market has developed the way it has, right? Like if you look, so, again, my background is working with the US intelligence community, and we have some amazing talent over at NSA. We've never developed the same sort of ecosystem that Israel has developed. And there's a few reasons for that. One is just the way NSA is structured, right? Like whether you're military or civilian, you tend to go in as an individual, work for as long as you want, and then eventually kind of come out the other end. And there isn't necessarily an infrastructure waiting there to catch you. In Israel, military service is compulsory. 8200, their version of NSA, is the largest unit over there. but you go in as a cohort, right? So you go in with, let's say, 20 people. You work together for, depending on the unit, 3 to 6 years. And then the majority of you come out together. So now you've got a group of people that know how to work together, know how to solve a specific problem, and are looking for something to do. And then around that, you have a group of existing founders that have already been successful. They came out of that same unit and are looking to mentor the newer graduates. And so they take them under their wing and help them understand how to start a company. Those later stage successful founders also have relationships with the VC ecosystem. And you have a very concentrated group of 5 early stage cyber VCs that are very focused on that market. And so those entrepreneurs get connected into us. We help fund them, and they become that next generation of founders that mentor the next group coming out. And so you get this great flywheel.
Cool. I want to get back to Merlin for a minute. If I'm an entrepreneur and I'm going to partner with you and the team, Seth, I want to know what your company values are. What are kind of the values that you try and live every day at Merlin with you and the team? And how do you make sure that's happening?
Yeah. I mean, even stepping back from Merlin, right? There's a general sort of VC code of ethics, right? Of VCs will generally not sign NDAs, for instance, but it's kind of the VC honor code of, if you share information with me, it stays with me, right? We're not going to go use that against you with other companies or anything like that. So there's that trust level that's very important. For Merlin specifically, I think, though, there is a collaboration approach, right, of information sharing and working with our network and just trying to help each other, right? And I think the biggest thing, frankly, is just the work ethic, right? Like we expect a lot from our entrepreneurs, but if you look at our own team, I mean, especially the Israeli team, where with the time difference, right, they're working all day, their hours, and then they're still working most of the day on our hours as well, because they just don't want to see anything drop, right? They want to get everything done, and they want everybody to see like what an amazing capability we've built. And so there's that sense of ownership and the work ethic that comes with it.
Yeah, it's really cool. One last question, Seth. I'm sure you aspire to grow, continue to get the brand out there, continue to have success for all the entrepreneurs that you deal with. Where do you see the company in 5 years? What would be ideal for you?
I mean, I think the model we have right now, I mean, first off, look, the market is always going to dramatically change, and we don't necessarily know where it's going to be in 5 years. But I think we've built an infrastructure to last. And in 5 years, I think we will still be focused on cybersecurity. I think we will still be focused on early stages just because it's really what we know and what we're passionate about. I think our infrastructure will be even bigger than it already is today in terms of the number of team members we have supporting it, the strength of our network, right? None of those are going away. And as we grow and are able to pour more resourcing into it, I think we'll be able to do a lot more really interesting things. But we like kind of the structure we've built today, the collaborative environment we've built, the check sizes we're writing, right, and sort of the space we play in. We think it's the right place to be for us. That's not to say that we couldn't eventually look at some of the later stage stuff, specifically because we have Merlin Cyber, our sister company there, to really help companies grow into federal. It potentially makes sense, but right now we're pretty heads down focused on this early stage space and just making sure that we have the best possible infrastructure there to help our company succeed.
Seth and his team at Merlin understand that venture capital is not just about investing money, it's about investing in relationships. Startups have choices in their partners, just like VCs do, but by prioritizing their robust network, extensive resources, and unparalleled support, Merlin has positioned itself as a clear leader in the sector, destined to win future portfolio partners. At Welcome to the Arena from ICR, we're working really hard to bring you exciting guests and great content. If you found this episode insightful, please subscribe to the show on your podcast app and leave us a 5-star rating. The more the show grows, the more interesting voices we can have on the podcast, and in turn, that should demystify a lot of the stakeholders around public companies and soon-to-be public companies. Thank you so much for listening. I'd like to thank Seth for joining me on the show today. Merlin is investing in incredibly successful and important companies, and they've set a high standard for true partnership in venture capital. This is Tom Ryan. We'll see you next time back in the arena.
References to specific stocks are not intended to be recommendations for specific trading behavior. Comments presented on this podcast are intended for informational and educational purposes only, and do not represent opinions or recommendations on whether to buy, sell, or hold shares of a particular stock. All investors are advised to conduct their own independent research into individual stocks before making a trading decision. In addition, investors are advised that past stock performance is no guarantee of future price performance.
This episode is brought to you by In-Q-Tel, an investment advisory firm that provides a premier endowment-style investment approach and family office services to eligible clients tailored to the unique needs of your family. The founding team behind In-Q-Tel are entrepreneurs at heart with an uncompromising focus on clients and investment excellence. With over 30 years' experience as investors, they have a broad understanding of each asset class, deep institutional relationships, and a network that provides assets to exclusive private investment opportunities. Visit www.ieqcapital.com to learn more.
While neither Tom Ryan nor the show receives fees from IEQ-Capital in connection with the sponsorship, nor is Tom a client of IEQ-Capital, ICR must note the potential conflict of interest in recommending IEQ-Capital in light of our potential for a future business relationship. All statements in this episode express the speaker's respected personal views and do not reflect the opinions or review of IEQ-Capital.